Hi, I'm Brian Williams from Northshire Consulting, a registered investment advisory firm in Connecticut. Today, we're going to be discussing 529 plans. These plans are designed to help people save for education expenses. We're going to be focusing mostly on the Connecticut plan, which is run by Fidelity. This is the Connecticut Higher Education Trust, referred to as CHET, but a lot of the principles hold true through other state plans too. So just because you're investing in a program that's not Connecticut, you'll still find some value in this video. You don't necessarily have to participate in the state program of the state that you live in. So for example, in Connecticut, a lot of people will participate in the Virginia plan or the Utah 529 plan. And they're doing that because they're looking for maybe a specific investment or a specific way that the allocations are put together for the target date-based programs. And sometimes they're just looking for a particular fund family, or they're monitoring fees and expenses. But for the purpose of this exercise, we're going to be focused on the Connecticut plan. So first, a little bit of background. In December of 2020, Connecticut announced that they'd be partnering with Fidelity to run this CHET program. Previously, it was with TIA. Connecticut cited Fidelity's ability to maintain the accounts without any minimums or account fees and provide some planning along the way. Fidelity did a really good job putting this website together. There's a lot of really good tools on there, a lot of really good information, not just on the advisor side, but on the participant side as well. We'll get into this more later, but there's a couple different programs you can participate in. There's the CHET Direct Plan, which is managed by Fidelity and offers about 37 professionally managed investment portfolios. So by direct, that means you're going right to the Fidelity website, you're establishing your account, you're choosing your beneficiaries, and you're choosing investments as well. They also have an advisor program. So the advisor program has 27 investment options, very similar in terms of having age-based programs, static allocations, also a stable value or kind of a fixed account program. And that's offered through investment professionals. So for those who feel like they need a little bit extra help setting things up, they might be working with an advisor who's using the advisor program. In the press release, they were talking about a planned effective date of February 8th to transition these accounts, with the advisor programs becoming effective at the end of March. So before we get into the differences between the direct program and the advisor program, let's just talk about some of the advantages of investing in a 529 program in general. So the earnings grow, federal tax deferred, your contributions are deductible from Connecticut income tax purposes, and your withdrawals are free from federal and Connecticut income taxes. So there are some significant tax benefits to participate in not just Connecticut's program, but other state programs. You do have the flexibility to use your funds in a variety of ways. They can be used for post-secondary expenses, K through 12 expenses, or most people think about 529 plans in terms of higher education. So although it can be used for K through 12 expenses, most people think of this in terms of college or post-secondary expenses. You can use it for K through 12, obviously, but most people want to continue to let that money grow and compound, for those 18, 22, 25 years. You do have quite a bit of investment choice, like we talked about. Fidelity is known for, having a pretty big stable of index funds. They have their blended funds, meaning they're balanced type funds, and also actively managed funds. So again, the difference between an index fund and an actively managed fund is an index fund is focused on a list of securities like the S&P 500 that you see in the newspaper or online or in the evening news. Whereas an actively managed fund, you have teams of portfolio managers and analysts deciding which stocks or bonds to put in those funds. So Fidelity does make it very easy to set up accounts. There's no minimum required to open. There is no annual fee, and you can put as little away as $15 a month. So with the Fidelity Direct plan, you do have a couple different options. You have the age-based portfolio, which adjusts automatically over time, and you have a customized portfolio that you can put together if that's something that you're into. With the age-based portfolio, think of those like your 401k plans that might have target date funds. So those are the funds that have a year attached to the end of it. So for retirement, you're going to see those dates really far out. You're going to see 2050, 2060 fund maybe. And the idea that as you go through retirement, this will slowly get a little bit more conservative for a couple reasons. Early on, you're not going to have that much money in the account because you're just starting and you've got a long time to meet your goal. In a case of retirement, it could be, 40 years. In the case of higher education, might be 18, 15, 20 years. So you have a long time to make up for potentially down markets. As you get closer to that goal, you have a child that's in high school or you approach that retirement date, you're going to have more money in there because you're closer to your goal and you have less room to tolerate any sort of market downturn. So same thing here with these age-based portfolios. So they line them up to when your child was born. So for example, if you have a newborn, you might be looking at the 2039 portfolio, meaning that's the year your child is expected to start to attend college. And then they work their way back from there. So you have these age-based portfolios. If you want to do something a little bit more custom, you have the ability to do that. You have some Fidelity funds like an aggressive growth fund. You have a conservative portfolio, and they're put together with underlying mutual funds to make it a little bit more confusing there. And you can get into more detail about what those fund of funds hold if you want to. It's all available on the Fidelity website. And you also have that index portfolio. Remember, we talked about those funds are tracking a list like the S&P 500. If you want to break it down even farther and actually pick the individual investment options, you do have that S&P 500 fund. You have a total market portfolio, which brings in some smaller companies, not just the biggest 500 companies. And you also have access to an international portfolio, a bond portfolio, money markets, etc. And then, of course, the age-based portfolios. So among the age-based portfolio, you can go with an index, you can go with a blend, you can go with actively managed. So you do have a lot of different choices, but I don't want you to be overwhelmed by those if you're doing a direct program. If it's something that confuses you, please just go through the age-based portfolios. What's nice about those is it's set it and forget it. You don't have to log in and change their allocation when they're 10 years old. And again, with their 15, it's designed to kind of work through the program as they continue to grow. So again, on their website, they give a ton of information, which is nice. One of the things they do is they give a breakdown of those age-based portfolios. So as I said, the portfolios get more conservative as the target gets closer. So for example, here you can see that the Fidelity 2039 fund is going to have a lot of equity in it, meaning a lot of stock. So you've got 52% in US and 42% invested internationally. So right there, you're at 95% is going to be equity. So again, very aggressive type portfolio compared to what you might have later on. Whereas if you're looking at a 2027 where your goal is a little bit closer, you see those equity allocations 22 and 23 respectively between US and non-US. And then you can also see the breakdown. So obviously that money, that allocation has to flow somewhere. So it's going to come back in the bond side. So for example, the 2039 fund doesn't have any investment grade bond funds, but by the time you're at 2027, you're at 29% investment grade bond funds. So with these funds, there is an expense ratio, just like any sort of fund program. You can see these expense ratios right on the website. On the Fidelity Funds portfolio, you have expense ratios that are going to be a little bit higher than the index portfolios. And that holds true across all investments. Anything that's actively managed or requires some labor to pick the investments is going to have a little bit higher expense ratio. So we'll just focus for the purpose of this exercise on the 2039 fund. So that's the farthest one out that's available, but we'll use that to compare apples to apples as we go down the line. So 2039 fund, the expense ratio there is 0.97%. So just under 1%. Sometimes you hear it referred to as 97 basis points. With the index side, you'll see it's quite a bit lower, 14 basis points. So what you're trying to do here is you're trying to figure out if that extra expense of the Fidelity funds is going to give you that much more performance to make up for that extra expense. And then the blended portfolios, as you'd expect, falls right kind of in the middle, 60 basis points, 0.60% for that 2039 fund. And here they're breaking down what these look like as far as the program manager fee and what goes back to the state that gets you to that total of 97 basis points. What's nice too is on these portfolios, also on the advisor side, they give you a breakdown of a hypothetical $10,000 investment and what that would cost over 1 year all the way up to 10 years. So you say, all right, then 97 basis points, what does that really mean? Well, so that's, 97, 98 basis points comes out to $98 for every $10,000 that's invested. So over the course of 10 years, that's going to cost $1,184. That expense ratio that's built into the funds. If you wanted to take an even further in-depth analysis of what mutual funds are actually in that 2039 portfolio. So here's the Fidelity Funds portfolio, which is the first one that we looked at. Here's all the funds that make up that 2039 portfolio and the percentage allocations, which add up to 100% of the portfolio. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the advisor program. If you're somebody who feels like you need some assistance, you can reach out to an advisor and they might be connected with the Fidelity program and they can help you out, help you set this up. With the advisor program, there's 4 different share classes. And all that means is there's different ways to pay your advisor for that assistance. And what happens with these different share classes is that money comes out of your portfolio and it drags down your returns a little bit. Ideally, if you're working with an advisor, you're better off paying that advisor outside of the 529 program. So we'll show you the share class that makes that a little bit easier to do. So with the direct plan, we were looking at the 2039 portfolio. So we'll keep that going here on the advisor side. So let's talk about the different share classes. You have A, C, I, and P. And this is very similar to the regular mutual fund where A shares typically have a front end load or sales charge. C is more of an ongoing sales charge. They're a little bit more expensive. And then you have a P class and an I class, which usually means the institutional share class and is almost always the least expensive share class. So let's work through them here, going from most expensive to least expensive. So on the C class share, that is the most expensive. So for this portfolio, the 2039 fund, C class, you're looking at an expense ratio of almost 2%, 1.97%. And the reason being that difference in fees is how the advisor is compensated. So that extra expense ratio is what's going back to the advisor. So on the advisor side here, again, see 1.97%. On the P share, P is in Paul, 1.72%. On the A share, 1.22%. And on the I class, it's 0.97. So a little bit under 1%. And that's very similar to what we saw on the direct side, right? We were looking at that 0.97% expense ratio. And that's because the I class, there's no built-in compensation to the advisor. So let's say, for example, you want to work with an advisor, but you just want to pay that advisor an hourly rate just to help you set this up. You don't need any sort of ongoing relationship. If you're looking for this to be part of your planning relationship, sometimes that happens too. You're paying an advisor for the financial plan. There's no reason to, again, pay that advisor additionally for the 529 program. So in my opinion, you should almost always use the I share class. That's going to give you the most bang for the buck. It's going to let your account compound at a faster rate. Because remember, these fees, you might be paying these fees for 18, 20 years. So over time, even though you're talking about fractions of a percentage, it can really make a significant difference. So for example, if you're putting in $100, $3.50 is going to come out of that. So you put in $100 and $96.50 is going to go into your account. There's also an annual account maintenance fee on that as well of $20. So in conclusion here, guys, I know I threw a lot at you in terms of a bunch of numbers, fees, and expenses, but here's what you need to know. If you're comfortable doing it yourself, absolutely go the direct route. Log on to Fidelity, set that account up. You can put money into this account a few different ways. You can send in a check. You can have it automatically pull from your checking account. The other thing too is you can also have it deducted from your paycheck if you want to go that route. It'll work like a direct deposit. You get a bank account and a routing number, and then it'll come right from your paycheck. You might also, if you're going that route, you might also want to check with your employer to see if their workplace retirement account, if the advisor that's working on your 401k plan will also help with that 529 plan investment. Here's why. If you're working with an advisor on the outside, they might use that A share, that expensive share class, and charge you an additional fee for that. Whereas your 401k advisor who's working through your employer as part of the financial wellness program, that might already be part of your employer benefits package. So when you're sitting with your advisor to work through your 401k, that advisor might also help you with that least expensive share class. So it could save you a lot of money. So check with your employer and see if that benefit is available. If you do work directly with an advisor, make sure they're using that I share class, that least expensive share class. And that doesn't mean the advisor shouldn't be compensated for their time or for their expertise, but make sure you can write them a check on the outside. Ideally, you just want that money to stay in the 529 plan and compound as much as possible. You don't want your fees to eat away at the potential balance that could be available for that education expense. So thanks for watching. Brian Williams from Northshire Consulting, an investment advisory firm in Connecticut. Be sure to like, subscribe, and if you have questions, you can reach out to me directly, or you can put them in the comments section below the video. Thank you.